The story of the Pope's exorcist begins in 1987 in Tropea in Italy, where we meet Father Gabriele Amorth, who arrives at the house of an apparently possessed man who, after talking to him and asking him to say his name, gives him no clue, and describes hell to him. While trying to free himself, the priest decides to show him an amulet from the Vatican that helps him differentiate the real demons from the mentally ill, and when he realizes that he is not possessed, he challenges him that he is not capable of possessing a pig, and when he falls into Father Gabriele's trap, the man believes he has possessed the pig, and a man in the room kills the animal. We advance in time where we meet Julia, a woman whose recently deceased husband inherited a house in Spain which she seeks to repair in order to sell it since she has no money. We see the workers and Father Tomas Esquibel arrive at the house, who wants to help Julia. We also meet Henry, her youngest son, who has not said a single word since his father left this world a year ago. Henry, who is somewhat curious, investigates the house, hears strong footsteps accompanied by a sound creepy coming from a hole in the wall. Henry approaches to look and observes a kind of symbol, and from his behavior we realize that something bad is happening. Here we meet Amy, the older sister, and her mother, who does not know where is Henry and wants her to trust her oldest daughter to take care of Henry and make him talk again, which she doesn't like and is very upset with her for the changes they are making. Back with Father Gabriele Amorth, we see him arrive at an audience regarding the exorcism he previously performed in Tropea, Italy without the approval of the church, which he rejects because it was not a real exorcism, but a person with a temporary mental illness where he only used the young man to be able to free him and believe that evil happened to the pig, as well as 98% of his exorcism cases, which do not turn out to be true, and whom he later sends to a psychiatrist, leaving only the remaining 2% of the cases. Cases is true, facts that science cannot explain and that he himself calls evil, something with which the rest of the parents do not agree because they believe that they can harm people who want to remove the position of chief exorcist from the Father Amorth, and they also question him about a previous exorcism case he had with a young woman, angering everyone in the room with him, but Gabriele brushes them off and makes it clear that he is the Pope's appointed head of exorcism, and they have a grievance with him, they must address him, and he leaves the room as boss of bosses. We go back to Julia's house where a worker looks through the hole in the wall, turns on a light and causes a loud explosion, takes him to the ambulance and tells them that they found a gas tank and they can't keep working. Let's go see back to Henry, who, looking through the hole, was possessed, telling his mother and sister that his end had come and he was tearing his face, scaring them, and they take him to the doctor, where they tell him that it may be psychosis due to the trauma caused by the departure of his father. Returns home and asks Julia for help at the Spanish consulate. At that moment the power goes out and supposedly the real Henry wakes up hugging his mother while Amy goes downstairs to turn on the light, and we see that it really is not Henry, as he insults his mother in a scary voice and shows them that he has a scar with the word hate on his stomach, while yelling at her to bring the father, which his mother does, but when Father Thomas walks into the room, he flies instantly because the evil being within Henry is looking for another father. We see Father Amorth talk to the Pope, who, after a talk about how they consider the devil to be a real manifestation, unlike the other fathers who consider it just a concept, the father takes advantage of the fact that he is with the chief exorcist, and tells him that he asks him to go to Spain to see a young man whose possession is advancing very quickly. So he goes out and inspects the garden while Father Tomas receives him, who recognizes him by his articles and books taken in real life, and invites him into the house, confusing Julia with the church's interest in her son, but the father convinces her to let him see Henry to help him. She goes up the stairs and sees Henry sleeping and scarred on the floor. The father begins to pray for the one next to him and hears a terrifying voice from Henry telling him that his prayers are useless. So Gabriele places the same amulet in front of his eyes that he showed him in the previous exorcism and realizes that this time there is a demon inside. Then, he asks this evil being why he does it, and he answers that it is because of the delicious sensation of possessing an innocent body, and he challenges him by shouting that God is not there, and he challenges him by telling Father Gabriel that he cannot do anything, because he knows his sins and his nightmares, reminding him of his time in the army that he managed to survive by pretending not to be alive. Also, spitting out a red bird at that moment and scaring Father Gabriele Amorth, who knows that only a very powerful demon can do that, who also knows things he shouldn't know, leaves the room and tells Julia that the only way to recover it is with faith, realizing that everything comes from the departure of his father, since evil always takes advantage of the weakest people, that Henry witnessed the accident since he was right at the moment of the crash, seeing everything. Father Gabriele asks Julia if she has faith because she will need it. Then we go to Amy, who hears banging in Henry's room and goes to see him and finds him asleep, but waking him up and telling him he's in hell. A terrified Amy returns to her room and receives a call with her father's voice telling them that no one he will live. He runs to his mother and tells everything to her and to Father Gabriele, who tells them that they should rest. Father Gabriele Amorth tells Father Tomas that he needs to know the name of the demon, only then can he be exorcised, and upon hearing the prayers at some point he will give in, but asks him to first confess his sins, since being a very powerful demon he knows them and can use it against him, thus making the confession very quickly without giving details and asking him to pray when he enters with him. And also, do not answer anything the being tells you, do not look him in the eye, and do not even stops. They both enter the room and prepare while Henry tried to drive him away. Father Gabriele and Tomas begin to pray together, forcing him to obey him, causing the being to begin to writhe and turn off the light for a moment. And when he turns on, he sees the woman the other parents were talking about, the young woman named Adela, who apparently Gabriele is the cause of his departure from this world, for which, although he has already confessed it, he has not been able to forgive himself. Same. Returning with the evil being within Henry, who uses the sins of Father Thomas against him, who knows that he has had relations with one of the daughters of the people of the church, where Father Thomas falls into his trap and ends up attacking him, but Father Gabriele manages to get him out. They both leave the room while the being inside Henry tells them that he took the bait that is going to destroy him. Father Thomas then told him that she was the love of his life, but he asked her to stop being a priest, which he was unwilling to do, so he lied to her, saying that he would, repenting of his sin. With the Father Gabriele and asking him why Adela, the woman that the devil showed them, thus telling the father that she was someone who should have helped and did not, that now evil uses her against him, for which he asks him to learn a Latin phrase to be more effective. Asking Thomas to stand outside the room, and Father Gabriele goes to check the garden, where he finds a plate with the Vatican seal and removes it with the motorbike, while we see an upturned cross in Julius' room. While a hand holds it, he holds it, and Father Tomas also hears Henry's voice asking for help, going in to check and getting too close to him, shaking his hand and ripping off his ear and then laughing chillingly, also telling him again that no one will get out of here alive, being Amy too attacked just like their mother. The older sister hides in the closet while Julia is pushed into her bed. All this happens while the father sees many skulls in the well, causing an explosion, and then goes back into the house helping Julia and controlling the being with Latin prayers and finding a devil's claw. Amy leads them to the chapel, where Father Gabriele unsuccessfully tries to comfort Tomas and tells him that the devil does that to distract and trick them, thus returning and showing them the well, where in the background is the symbol of the Spanish, the Inquisition, and the skulls that surround it are victims of those who did not want to convert. In addition, that in the background is the hole through which everyone has looked. Seeing the Vatican seal and noticing the smell to sulfur breaking the wall and feeling this the demon in Henry and waking up, the priests manage to break down the door and finding catacombs with corpses, which was a place sealed by the Vatican many years ago, finding the cardinal's ring, who was the last protector and who was locked in a cage to protect him, many years ago. The father was possessed and they could not exorcise him. Thomas tries to open a door while the Pope sees a letter from the cardinal protector in the church, who says that this door must remain closed at all times, while Father Gabriele looks for the key in the father's stomach. Corpse and finds it, while the father reads that all exorcism attempts failed and the place was occupied by Satan, the most evil and powerful demon, causing a heart attack at that moment to the Pope and managing to open the door. Julia also wakes up and looks for her daughter while the priests feel more the smell of sulfur that is the smell of the end, because they are getting closer to hell. Returning at this moment with the Pope, who is hospitalized and asks them to say something to Gabriele, while the parents find an ancient writing by a monk that told the story of a very powerful demon who managed to possess several monks, making a multiple possession, using this one of the monks to convince Queen Elizabeth that an inquisition was needed. Thus began the Crusades, and the worst time for the church, in which many horrible acts were committed by the devil in the name of God. Upstairs, Julia finds Henry and Amy holding hands while both are possessed and speaking to her in a paranormal manner, asking Henry to let go of Amy as she hides a gun behind her back. Then we see Gabriele realizing that they are in a place where 1 in 200 angels were banished from heaven to earth, turning it into a hellish place, Meanwhile, Julia manages to free Amy from possession, being attacked by Henry just like Amy and about to be finished off. Father Gabriele Amorth manages to decipher the name of the demon, and it is Asmodeus, causing him to weaken and making Henry free his mother and sister, as well as breaking a glass in the church and realizing that this evil being feeds on exorcists, reason for which he who is so strong and thus prepares to exorcise him. Confessing Gabriele one last time with Thomas and telling him that in 1942 he fought in the war and saw his friends fall at his side, so he feels that if he manages to survive he must give his life for God. And when Adela told him that at night the devil came to have things with her and that the devil was just like Gabriele and ended up eating a little red bird at that moment, the same thing that Henry spat out when he saw him, but I knew that this girl has a mental illness for which another left his job. But when he returned he found her about to self-destruct, and before doing so I asked her if she already believes that she is really possessed, disappearing in front of her eyes, and she has been carrying all this time with that error. He returns to the house blessing everyone with the armor of God and telling them that the devil will use their sins against them and not to believe what they see or what they hear. He goes to Henry's room, who is tied up, and everyone begins to pray. But Henry ignores them and tells Father Gabriele to let him in and shows him the image of Adela on the ceiling, distracting him for a moment, but managing to realize that it is only in his mind, and continues with Thomas showing him his sins and Gabriele beginning to pray with a cross in front, doing it while he resists and little by little manages to stop him, and hearing the normal voice of Henry who is looking for his mother, and Gabriele asks him to resist the demon. Henry fainting and Gabriele approaching and looking at his body with the sentence "God is not here," and realizing that Amy has just been possessed, breaking through the ceiling and attacking the father and mother, asking them to give her what she wants and suffocating Tomas and Julia while immobilizing Gabriele, Julia desperately begging her the children come back, and they tell Gabriele to let them go. To which he responds to say the words, and here we see how he has begun to possess the father Gabriele Amorth, leaving Amy alone, trapping the father, finally waking up the real Henry. The father tells Tomas to take the cross from his hand and take everyone. When doing this he gets Julia and her children into the car and decides to stay, and when he realizes that Father Amorth was possessed and in the church Jesus bleeds and there is damage to the parents, while Gabriele fights with him, he tried to hang himself to prevent the being from taking him and getting into the Vatican to cause misfortune in the name of the Lord, but being interrupted by him that prevents him from being sent to heaven, and so return to the ground floor of the house and find at that moment an image that seems to be the Virgin, but soon we realize that it is actually the woman who torments Father Gabriele. Tomas returning at that moment and finding a possessed Gabriele sitting in the chair like a god, telling him that he has arrived late and that God is not there. Tomas trying to convince him that God is in his heart and praying while asking him to repeat with the "Lord have mercy." Thus he begins to pray while Gabriele, still being possessed, tries, seeming to work, but as Tomas approaches, he finds himself face to face with the woman who throws him against a wall, and then he sees the woman of his sins and tells them that they will both go to hell and that their sins will go looking for them, fleeing, but managing to. Tomas gets rid of his sins by putting the cross on his forehead and Gabriele putting the cross on the other woman, both praying in Latin against the devil. Although he resists, they manage to get rid of him, for which Gabriele thanks Tomas, and they think that God he acts in very mysterious ways, finally having a quiet moment. In the last chapter we see them return to the church with their father, who managed to recover and thanks them for what they did. The cardinal tells them that Henry the family managed to recover and that even if they manage to defeat these beings, he will. They soon find another 199 places where God is not welcome, thus forming Father Gabriele Amorth and Thomas Esquibel a team of exorcists to end all of them until 2016, when Father Gabriel leaves this world. This story is based on the real life of Father Gabriele Amorth, the Vatican's chief exorcist. So let me know if you liked it and subscribe for more. See you in the next video.